All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. But before I introduce you to our next speaker, if you have not checked in for the SCA meeting, if you could just raise your hands. We have staff here who can check you in real quick, but we want to make sure that everyone is accounted for. So if you have not been able to check in, just raise your hand, and one of our interns will come and make sure you're checked in. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda, we're going to hear about best practices from our SCA coordinator in Indiana, Katie Lerman.
Look at that, it worked. All right, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you had a really good lunch. If you had something really amazing, please catch me at the end of the day because I'm a big foodie and I'm trying to experience lots of things while I'm here in San Francisco. So, as was said, my name is Katie Lehman and I'm an out-of-school time specialist with the Indiana Department of Education and specifically oversee the south and part of the central region of the state. In addition, since we at the state like to wear many hats, I also oversee the Title I-D program as well. So today I was invited up here to talk to you about Indiana's Grantee Readiness Series, which is a 5-part training series that Indiana offers to prep all returning and new applicants for the RFP, also known as the RFA. So today we're going to do an overview of that Grantee Readiness Series, or the what. We're going to talk about why the series was developed, who's involved in the sessions, when and where those sessions occur, the positive outcomes that we've seen in Indiana, as well as the areas that we're still working on, and then I will open it up for questions as long as I remain within my time. All right, so the Indiana Department of Education's 21st Century Grantee Readiness Series, lovingly abbreviated to GRS, is a series of live webinars that work to educate applicants about 21st century, its requirements, and the requests for proposal. This 5-part series takes place over the course of 3 months. So we have a pre-recorded webinar that just walks through the 21st century program, our RFP, kind of gives applicants a basic outlay of everything, and then we get into our live sessions. So our first one is a session on how to develop your 21st century application and how to manage the financial piece of the program. Then we go into designing the program and its operational structure, understanding program evaluation, data collection and reporting requirements, and building your program team and ensuring program sustainability. Within these, there are a lot of other little nuances and components. For example, we talk about continuous quality improvement, completing the continuous quality improvement tool that Indiana has, the INQPSA, as well as other little nuanced things that come up throughout the process. So, the big thing was, why was this series developed? And so this GRS series started when Indiana launched Cohort 12, which was back in the 2019-2020 school year. The reason it was launched is because there were some noted difficulties and disparities in the grant competition as identified by the previous IDOA staff, as well as some of our technical assistance partners that have been involved in the process for quite some time. Some of those were organizations without a grant writer on staff or without the funds to pay for one were less likely to be selected for funding due to their application quality. Community-based organizations, because we do allow community-based organizations to apply in Indiana, were at a disadvantage due to less experience overseeing and managing title funds. And then we also noticed that there was a cycle. Those who were awarded once were more likely to be awarded again, as they were familiar with the process and the requirements and therefore put together a stronger application. And then overall, we put together the series to help all applicants understand 21st CCLC and all of its requirements before they were awarded. Has anybody ever had an applicant where you read through or they start and you're like, oh my goodness, you have no idea what you got yourself into? Yes. So through this process, we hoped to decrease that. So everybody that comes in knows exactly what they're getting into. all of the data that we're going to require. They get to read through our policy manual ahead of time. They know everything that's going to be asked of them so that they come into this prepared when they get that funding. So we are very lucky in the state of Indiana to have a wonderful network of technical assistance partners, and a lot of them have been working with us and with our grantees for quite some time. So it is really a collective effort of our staff and our partners who volunteer. They volunteer their time to help co-host these sessions. It includes our after-school network. They speak to aligning your program to our after-school standards and using the INQPSA, as well as the quality resources that they offer. We have our statewide evaluator in Indiana, it's Deal Consulting, and he speaks to 21st century data reporting, both at the subgrantee level and at the state level, and what to look for when you're selecting a local evaluator, which we do require at the IDOE. We also have the Indiana Youth Services Association. They oversee our child and youth care credentialing process, which we highly encourage our 21st century participants to partake in and receive. We also give a priority point for it as long as 25% of their staff or more have that credential. And then they also speak to hiring and processes to retain high quality staff. So the when and the where. The first grantee readiness session is pre-recorded and it releases with our RFP, which typically releases in late February. As I mentioned, it is a walkthrough of the application, each of the sections, any of the attached documents such as the budget, the PD template, everything walks through the entire thing. And then we hold our subsequent sessions via Microsoft Teams once a month, April through July. Usually they're scheduled to last about 2 hours with the last 15 to 20 minutes left for open questions. And that's really where we learn a lot about our RFP is through that process. This is the first time that my teammate and I have run the competition. We're both relatively new to the department. We both participated in it on the grantee side. So we've learned a lot through these questions, and then we use those to kind of reformat parts of the RFP as we look moving forward. So again, the first 2 sessions are meant to fully inform attendees about the grant and its requirements. They both take place before the intent to apply is due. This helps potential applicants really determine if the grant is something their organization can manage and implement. Now, with the way we run cohorts in Indiana, we have 2 that run about 1 year apart. So when we launch the RFP for cohort 12, if there are applicants that may be on the fence about applying, we do let them know, hey, in another year, we're going to launch cohort 13. This is your opportunity. Take the time, learn the process, really get to dig in, and then if you feel like you need more time, you can always apply in cohort 13. So we take the lead on those first 2 sessions, and then we lean in and attend and assist in subsequent sessions. So the staff are in attendance at all of them. However, we let our TA partners shine in some of them. For example, in the state evaluation and the data collection piece. So some of the positive outcomes that we've seen, we've had an increase in the diversity of applications. So we're getting a better mix of LEAs, CBOs, and we're even starting to see some faith-based organizations apply. Part of that has been because of our work with our ombudsperson and talking about the equitable services piece of 21st century. We have applicants that know what they're getting into. So no one is surprised when we say, hey, we have this large amount of data. I need you to submit all of your students' grades, demographic information, teacher surveys, and I need them by May 31st. Thank you. So while it can still be a struggle, they know that it's coming and it's coming every year. We still have a little bit of struggle when we get new program directors and when new staff come on board, but we have these things in place and can always refer them back to this series since all of it's outward-facing information to help onboard them. We get less questions throughout the grant competition, and we have opportunities for questions to be asked and answered in real time. Like I said, this is where we've really learned about our RFP and where we need to provide additional clarity. So every time a question is asked, my teammate and I will go back and look at that section in the RFP and say, okay, what happened? We're getting a lot of questions on this section. What do we need to change? How do we need to word it? What do we need to scale down? I will say we're going to take our grant application online in cohort 13, which is going to solve a lot of these wording problems for us, because we're going to have to scale back a lot of the content within the RFP, and it's really going to streamline the process. There will, of course, be some bugs. If any of you do the online submission of grant applications, you know there's some bumps in the road with that, but we're excited to see how that impacts our process. And of course, there's things that we're still working on. As I said, we have to simplify and clarify that RFP. We inherited the previous RFP and did a couple pass-throughs through it to update it, and then found out there was still information that we needed to clarify for grantees, even those who have been funded for quite some time. Continuing to promote both the Grantee Readiness Series and the 21st Century Grant, we're really looking at how we promote in terms of, is it equitable? We push out a lot through information and PR through the Department of Education, but we also know that that's not necessarily the best way to reach our CBOs. So we tag in our partners a lot at the After School Network, Social Legends, other groups to really help push out that RFP so that we get a diverse pool of applicants. And then we're also looking at evaluating our statewide OST needs and making adjustments based on those needs. So when I first came in the department, I got kind of voluntold into the cohort about the state evaluation. Deborah, you were there. And how we conduct the state evaluation, how we use those results. And so I went pretty gung-ho with that. We developed a 21st Century Stakeholders Group, which takes our statewide evaluation and uses that to develop an action plan for our statewide program. So we've just put our first one in place. We kept it simple with a couple goals, but that's just kind of a peek into what we're doing as we're looking at those needs and how we're going to incorporate those needs into our RFP. Thank you. All right, I did that quick. So what questions do we have? So we actually have pretty set attendance at each of the sessions with a little bit of fall off towards the end. We notice that a lot of our long-term grantees attend about the first 3, but then when it gets to the evaluation piece or the data piece, things that they're more familiar with, they may not attend those sessions. But typically we have about 75, 80 to 120 attendees at each session that we offer. And again, that's a diverse, it's applicants that have received funding before but may not currently receive funding, current grantees, and those who are potential grantees.
I was just wondering, you said each session has a Q&A session at the end. It seems a little tricky to me. I mean, you can tell me if it's tricky, like what you can say and what you can't say, and you don't want to give anybody an advantage over people who didn't attend. How do you manage that?
So right off the bat, we tell anybody in attendance that we cannot answer anything that is application specific, only about the RFP and 21st century requirements. All of the sessions are recorded. They are posted to an open drive, and everybody has access to that drive. So whether it's publicly posted so they can click on it and review the series and see the exact same answer that we gave that applicant in real time. We've also in the past uploaded a frequently asked questions document that allows and kept it as a live document that could be added to, but it can be tricky. We do tell people sometimes, I can answer this piece, but I can't answer that piece of the question. And sometimes we'll have a nice grantee in the meeting who will offer a little insight to them. Not always, but sometimes our grantees will lean in and help assist in that question.
Could you tell us the time frame for your RFP from when the announcement is made to when the applications are due?
Absolutely. So this is something that changed when we implemented, it actually changed before we implemented the GRS, but previously we did a pretty quick turnaround. I want to say it was like 8 weeks from the time of launch to the time of due date. If you've ever written this grant before, that's terrifying, especially if you are someone who's never written a grant before. I got to do that. But now we've extended that process. So we launch our RFP at the very end of February. Again, we launch that first GRS session at the same time. And then our applicants have 6 months to work on their application. So from February until August, they're due in August. We do the peer review, we announce awards in September, and then our grantees don't actually receive funding until the next year, July 1st of the next year. So cohort 12 will be awarded July 1st, 2025. It is a slow process. However, I will say that after the time of award, that allows us to work with the grantees on developing their year one budget, collecting their professional development plans, answering any questions they may have. It allows them time to get things established, and it also allows time for our contracting process because it's not fast.
Question, how do you broadcast your notifications?
So,
Especially to, like, for those, repeating customers, right? They know how to get to that information, but what about broadcasting to those individuals that are just, just out there?
so we have it posted on the website. It goes out in the Dr. Jenner's News You Can Use newsletter, which anybody can sign up for. And then we have to lean on our technical assistance partners. So our Indiana After School Network pushes it out. The Indiana Youth Services Institute, which they're not even a contracted partner, but they push it out for us. We have a lot of partners that we lean on to get that information out into programs that may not receive that newsletter from the IDOE.
Hi,
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
So I think it's great that you do like that kind of a process. It gives everybody enough time to get ready. But I am curious, do you allow them to bill for any of the work that they do between September and July 1? They just get their money July 1, so any work that they've done is just kind of on them.
Awards cannot go for any pre-grant costs. So
Okay.
if they hire a grant writer, that's out of their pocket. If anything that happens before that July 1st award, it's paid for out of their pocket.
Even after giving them the 6 months, I'm just curious, did anybody miss the deadline?
I'll let you know. This is my first grant competition, so I've heard stories, and I was sharing at my table earlier today. We do it's July, they're due next month, and we're getting some questions where it's pretty clear that someone just started working on the application. But that's part of the process. We can't force them to start working on it in February. That's okay. We give them the time. We have noticed with that extra time, we do get higher quality applications. So they're much more thorough. They address the content, which can be difficult in the awarding process. But overall, we want high quality, really well thought out programs. And so it gives them the opportunity to do so. Our peer reviewers. So Indiana had a really long peer review process previously. It took place over 2 days and was about 6 hours. However, we've actually scaled that back because we've kind of redone that peer review process, and a lot of the reviewers that were selected know the 21st Century grant very, very well. So we've actually scaled that down to a 2-hour training. The RFP and everything, the rubric is sent ahead of time for them to read through and to review. Then we get on the 2-hour training to walk through the scoring, the RFP, and to answer any questions that they may have.
With the peer reviewers, do you find that it can be a little unfair in that some peer reviewers are much tougher and score lower than other peer reviewers, and that sometimes the best applications are not the ones that end up being funded?
So with that, we have our peer reviewer calls, where if there's a big score discrepancy, they're going to get on a call together and they're going to talk through why things were scored that way. Just to see if, say, peer reviewer 1 missed a piece of information that was actually in the application and peer reviewer 2 caught that. Having participated in the peer review process, that's something you're going to run into. Sometimes you have those that score high, sometimes you have them low. I know states have different practices for mediating that. And so With us, each app is reviewed 3 times. We look at those scores. If there's a big discrepancy, we have a mediation call to come to a consensus on that application.
I'm just wondering in the room, how many have, the reviewers have that mediation call? Because
I know some of you do.
do people like it? Like, are there pros and cons to it?
I participated in one just a couple weeks ago, and it was actually the first one I had participated in, so I'll speak from the participant perspective. It was really interesting to actually see the reasoning behind how people scored certain sections. The person who was in charge of our group did not try and sway us one way or another. It was left to us as the peer reviewers to really talk through our stance and determine how we were going to then rescore that section.
And you have one of the reviewers be like the main person that sort of leads the mediation?
We actually had one of the state coordinators was there to mediate. They asked the questions and then just kind of sat back and let us talk it out. I got lots of
I
questions.
have a follow-up question to Julie's about that pre-grant timeframe that's volunteer or not paid for by the 21st Century funds.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing idea. That's why I want to know more about what that timeline looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Like what kind of activities happen between September and July 1st, where they're not getting paid out of 21st Century funds.
A lot of times it's, like I said, developing that budget for the first year, developing their professional development plan because we require them to have one and allocate 2% of their budget towards it. And sometimes it's reworking the budget that they proposed if they were not chosen or if they did not receive a full fund, like fully funded.
So I'm just curious, so if
By
you're
that time.
awarding in September for the next July, have you had a situation where everyone who wrote the grant, a lot of turnover could happen between then and the time of actual implementation, and so everyone that went through the training and got all the great information that was provided is no longer there. So have you had situations like that, and how have you dealt with it?
Absolutely. There's turnover all the time in 21st Century. So we've developed, we have onboarding resources that are available on our online platform. Once a new program director comes on board, their OST specialist reaches out, say, great job joining 21st Century. You need to sign up for a Moodle account. You need to pin this grantee weekly updates. And then here are the resources that will really help you kind of start to understand the 21st Century program. Once you've gone through those, please let me know. We'll schedule a call or we can email to answer those questions. And then we also have regular meetings with our grantees that allow us to kind of get those touch points with those people. As a person who came in and inherited a grant that I did not write, I've been in that position. We did not have the resources at that time in place, and so it was very much learned by this, flying by the seat of your pants, but we did it. And so the nice thing about having run a program funded by 21st Century and then becoming a state coordinator is you can kind of implement some of the resources and the training that you wish you would have had when you started. I was told that was my last question, but I'm here until Thursday. So
Well, mine really isn't a question. It's actually a comment back to New York State about the
Okay.
peer review process and if the debriefing works. When they don't agree still after a debriefing, we will do a second read of that application and have 3 more people review that application. So we don't push them to come to a consensus because some people really stand strong on their opinions and what they feel, but we know there has to be a consensus. So we'll throw that read out and do a second read of that whole application.
That's
So I
something
just
we've
want
had to
give
do
you a
as
tip
well.
of that process.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. As she said, she's here until Thursday, maybe Friday, to answer any additional questions. Thursday? Okay. All right, the next presentation is a partnership between our National TA Center and our Monitoring and Assistance Team, as you know, who provides lots of TA and the professional development that most of you receive through the cohort series and also through 21 APR. So we wanted to provide you with a presentation to show that the TA and the PD that we provide, it's not just us looking at data to see what your needs are, but it's like, how do we help to strengthen your program quality? And this is what this presentation is about. It's going to be really engaging, and you'll have opportunities to reach out to Dr. Ortloff and Dr. Ferguson afterwards. So I will turn it over to them. There's going to be a brief transition because I think they need to change the laptop.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay, I have to stand over here because otherwise you can't actually see me over the podium. And this is where I make my standard, how there's a bias against short people in all podium building warehouses. Any case, it is lovely to see all of you in person. I'm so excited to be here. Yay! In this great city where it's also not quite as hot as last time we were all together. So I'm enjoying that as well. And we here are very excited to have the chance to chat with you about what this idea behind professional development is, and the various opportunities that are coming at you fast and furious, certainly. And just the way we're thinking about how that helps serve you in the name of continuous improvement. You know, it's one of my favorite words, and I got it in the first 30 seconds, so I'm particularly happy. So we're going to talk about technical assistance, professional development, program quality. And I think all of you, when we're thinking back to the work we've been collectively doing in the last few years together, this is really where it's been leading to, is the ability to move towards this more unified, data-driven program quality. And at the end of the day, and one thing we never want to forget, is all of that work, that effort, that energy, all of that, we're doing that because it makes programs that serve kids better. And what we're beginning to already see in our work together with the MAT team, and I'll speak briefly for my colleague Candace here, also with the work from NTAC, is that makes a difference. Helping you helps kids, and that's what we're really, really excited about. So without further ado, I will make sure the clicker works. And I think you all know us, but I'm going to briefly just say I'm Deborah Ortloff. I work with the monitoring assistance team as well as 21 APR, and I've had the distinct honor in the last almost 10 years now to work with all of you in a lot of different ways, asking questions about how can these data help us do better? How do we just keep thinking about what this means, how we can look at it differently, and how we can keep working together to serve kids better? I, as you all, I think know, if you know me, absolutely love this work. And I'm particularly excited about where we are with it right now. And Candace, can I ask you just briefly to introduce yourself, and then we'll move on.
I can just go right here. Hi again, everybody. It's nice to be here again with you after lunch. I know we're going to have to drum up some excitement. It's always hard. But my name is Dr. Candace Ferguson, and I am the project director for the National Technical Assistance Center for 21st Century. Have had the pleasure to work with Deborah and her team on this combined presentation, which we're really happy to give to you all because it shows that alignment that we're working together towards, and I know the department is working together towards as well. I will just say briefly, there are still many familiar faces in the room for me. I'm a former state coordinator for the Texas 21st Century Community Learning Centers program a long time ago, but like Deborah said, this work just gets in your blood, and it's the impact that you can make with students and families is so amazing, and with the state level staff who administer this work, because as Katie shared, it is not easy work, and I still have flashbacks, I think, from my first RFA that I also inherited in the number of questions that we got. So it's just nice to be here with you in the room today. You guys are like my colleagues. I always like to say, state coordinators, you are my people. I feel most at home when I'm here with you. And engaging with you and sharing information. So thank you, Deborah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's us. We're going to talk to you today a bit about this philosophy of professional development, this idea of PD and TA and what that really means. We started talking about this last January. I know not all of you were there. Some of you, in fact, are brand new and really have no reference point to this. But we're going to talk about what that means, what that philosophy means for what we're trying to do all together here for 21st century across the United States. Then we're going to move on and look at sort of connecting the dots between the SEA and the subgrantee through this professional inquiry model. We're going to ask you to participate in that conversation. So, shocking no one, you might be voluntold to also share something. Fair warning. And Candace will then also dig in a little bit more with the ITAP model that NTAC is working on right now as an example of how that's working. And then we're going to take a look ahead. What's coming next? Where are we going? What's on the horizon? So that's what's on tap for today, and we're going to get going with that. So those of you who were here not here, but together in January might recall we began this conversation about what is professional development and what does that sort of concept mean versus the more commonly used government term of TA. And really, why is it important for us to even make that distinction, right? And one of the things that I think we all hit upon as we were talking about it is that idea of a broader category, that idea of the professional long-term development of our field, of the professionals in the out-of-school time space, is a bigger and ongoing concept than technical assistance, which is like a tool in the toolbox, right? It's one particular form of professional development that is highly tailored, highly specific, and often technical in nature. That's great to have that as one tool, but we want to connect it with that bigger concept of capacity building and understanding of the field as a profession. So that idea of a PD plan for 21st century, whether we're talking about it from a national level like we're talking right now, whether you're talking about it vis-a-vis your own staff in your SEA, or whether you're talking about it from your state down through your subgrantees, all of that connects. And when we think about it from that bigger professional development perspective, it becomes less about compliance and less about solving a specific technical problem in the moment. Those still arise. We still can solve them. But when we can move up a notch, right? We all remember Emerald and kick it up a notch, right? When we can take it up that one higher level, then we're able to move beyond compliance and beyond immediate problem solving to long-term planning, to sustainable action, and to higher quality professionalization of the field. That national to state to local, which we talk about all the time when we're talking about evaluation, we're talking about outcomes, all of those things. That's the mantra that goes through in professional development as well. When we set the model here, when our colleagues at the department set the model with what they're doing, and we keep replicating that broadly and down, that's what creates a PD model. That's what also creates high quality programming for the US's 21st century program. Not just one school, not just one problem. That's exciting. That's real change. So that's what we're really talking about here. What's also happened is now we have some new tools and we have new data and we have new things that are helping us do this better. Yes, I get very excited about this, it's true. But it's exciting to see all these threads coming together and beginning to think in new ways about how we continue to improve the out-of-school time space. Okay, so again, if we think back briefly to January, we introduced this idea of, within this idea of professional development, it can be useful to have a philosophy for how you're approaching professional development, right? What is it, what's the underlying concept or underlying idea that's driving that professional development model? Once we sort of accept that premise that we're going for something bigger, that includes solving technical problems, once we accept that we're going for something bigger that connects the national to the state to the local, what is it that then ties it? What are the tying facets that we can find in each of those? So when we think about that, having what broadly is considered a philosophy of professional development is the idea of professional inquiry. And the idea of professional inquiry is helpful because it puts at the heart of the matter the idea that all of us as educators, all of us as those committed to 21st century and to improving 21st century, are consistently and sort of in an ongoing basis engaged in inquiry. We're engaged in asking good questions and looking for answers that further where we're going, that help us with our decisions and that help us allocate what are always too few resources to the best possible places. So I say all of that, and you might think, oh, wait, okay, but what does that all mean? We just heard what it meant. Katie was up here giving you example after example after example of good quality data and reflection that she was using. That is professional inquiry gold star. That is exactly what we're trying to think about. When we take that mindset, when we all acknowledge that we're professionals engaging in inquiry, engaging in the pursuit of improvement, of asking hard questions and looking for good answers, and we connect that to a professional development model, that becomes the way we think in 21st century. That then drives that idea of the national PD, the state PD, the local PD. It becomes the ties that bind. And we all together become professionals engaging in inquiry towards better programming. That's how students and families get served better and better. And it's exciting. It's exciting to hear and see, but it also is really helpful to name it and to say, this is what we're trying to do. We're engaged in a professional inquiry model in a unified commitment to professional development to improve out-of-school time programming through 21st century. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing here. And we're going to talk to you a little bit more about some of the ways we're doing that and some of the ways you're engaging in that as well. So let me pause here quickly and just say, and you can do, nodding of the head, showing of hands. Does that make sense when you sort of step back and does it resonate with you and you're thinking, yeah, okay, I get where she's going. She's not completely crazy. All right, I see shaking of heads. Thank you, Karen. I appreciate it. Right? Okay. So we're going to put this mindset on as professional inquirers, as those engaged in professional inquiry, as we continue on our journey in thinking about professional development and in thinking about how we pull together and make the best possible selections and commitments to professional development at the different levels and spheres of influence that we all have. We all have different spheres of influence. When we share vocabulary and we share commitment, we can, in our own spheres of influence, make those decisions in ways that multiply, that give that bigger power. Okay. I want to give you just a few examples of how this has begun to come about with data-driven decision-making influencing PD decisions. Really, what is that connection through good inquiry that leads us to good PD decisions? And ultimately, the question that's behind that is sort of like in the blue here. What data sources drive support offerings to SEAs? And you can ask that same question, again, in your sphere of influence, right? What data sources drive you to make decisions like the ones Katie was demonstrating for the PD offerings you want to put together in your state? And you can demand the same question of your subgrantees, and you can say to them, what data is driving you to offer this to your staff, to your families, to your... So again, over and over again, we want to see that question. We want inquiry to be driving the questions and the decisions we're making about our commitment to professional development. So just a few examples here, and you see them on the screen. The SEA monitoring review reports and outcomes. So the good and hard work that everyone in this room does as a part of the monitoring process, right? And if you've been monitored, you know it's a little bit of work, right? To pull that all together, and these fine folk doing that good work and interacting. But I will tell you, those are also some of the most rewarding conversations I have the privilege to be a part of. They are in-depth and they are thoughtful. And the ultimate outcomes, even when there's findings, are how do we get better, right? How do we move on? So what we do is take a look at all of that, right? Where's some commonality, where there might be issues or problems or areas that aren't unique to one area, but where we see SEAs might need more support in that. And then the department has the information they need to, with always too limited resources, make decisions about, okay, maybe this year we'll do a cohort on the RFA because we see a lot of questions or we see more findings in this particular area. So that's a really good example of let's look across the board at what is happening here, what are the findings, and what decisions should we make to help the most folks with where they need the most help, right? Perfect example of what data helps us make the best decisions to support high quality professional development to improve 21st century. So just again, a few other data sources that are helpful here. The biannual check-in process. You have all heard from your POs, and I've been on these calls, so I know that you have heard this over and over again. Our biannual call is like mini monitoring. It's a part of monitoring. It's a part of the monitoring process. Not every state can be fully monitored every year. That's probably not a bad thing, right? But those biannual calls, they do happen every year, twice a year, right? So you're still checking in on aspects of statutory compliance, on high quality programming. So all of that produces data. And very similarly to the example I just gave you for monitoring, when we look across what all of you are saying about your award notices, when we ask you questions about award notices, that can say, hey, I think we might need some TA on award notices, or hey, I think we need to do some PD broadly on the best processes to develop and check in around creating ongoing award notices, right? Okay, TA and PD feedback. That's why we ask you for those surveys, and I know my colleagues over at NTAC do the same thing. We want to hear what you need, what's missing, what isn't quite hitting the mark. And we want to hear what you say in Georgia and in Indiana and my friends in New York. But then we also want to see what not just each of you said, but what multiple of you said, because it's in the multiple that we also see, okay, right? We can go solve a particular problem through TA, right? If my friends in New York say, hey, we need a little bit of help talking about the GEPRA, we can have that individual or quick conversation and come in there. But when we have multiple states saying, hey, we're really struggling understanding how to connect state outcomes to national outcomes. That tells us something bigger about professional development. And you can replicate all of that within your own state and local context. And again, you can ask your local context to your local to do the same. And that national to the state to the local over and over again is how we pull together a professional inquiry model of professional development. And you can see the other examples here, the conversations between the department and SEA leaders. You have multiple conversations in different ways. That informs a conversation. And our good colleagues here at NTAC, this extensive needs assessment that they've developed that really digs in, and Candace is going to talk more about some of these things in just a moment. But you can see all of these ideas, they're all data. And I know you all think I'm slightly obsessed and think everything is data. Fair. Maybe fair. But in truth, almost everything is data. So it all informs the process. When we make it systematic, when we make it a part of inquiry, it is data. And it informs better decision-making and resource allocation. Okay. I'm going to pass this over to you. Yes. As I promised, NTAC in the house.
Deborah, I love your excitement and your enthusiasm and your energy for this work. I see your love for continuous improvement, and I will raise you on the data piece, the data-driven piece. I think that's something that's so critical and has been critical to the work that we've been doing at NTAC this first year. So for those of you who don't know, we were awarded the NTAC grant in September of last year. So we hit the ground running on this data piece in particular because, as Deborah said, we wanted to make sure that the services we were providing to you and your subgrantees was not only critical to your work, it was necessary, and it was based off of something. Somewhere it came from, whether it was your monitoring reports, whether it's conversations with the department staff of what it is that you wanted and needed. You know, we had visions and we had ideas for what we wanted the NTAC to be, and we've been able to live some of that out, but critical to that work is understanding what you want and what you need. And so we did have a little bit of time there in the beginning to kind of think through that philosophy, and Dr. Scroggins, and I wholly agree with her on this, data-driven is what she said. We want to be data-driven, data-focused, and let that be at the heart of everything that we do. So before we kind of do some breakouts here at your tables, I just wanted to share the timeline for the NTAC with you in developing our data-driven process and what we looked at, because I think it's critical to understand this is not the first time we will do this. We will do this continuously every year of the grant. So part of what we did, we were awarded in September. In December, we awarded a Technical Assistance Advisory Committee. Do I have members here in the room? Where are our TAC members? Could you raise your hand? So if you guys look around the room, you see your colleagues at the SEA level and subject matter experts who we assembled this group, pulled them together, and started talking about our ideas, our thoughts for the NTAC, where we could support more immediately and where we had a little bit of time to develop. So that was in December, and we had not only our first TAC meeting, but we also had side conversations, listening sessions with SEAs so that we could better understand the work that we were going to start putting out in this year. Now, because we did have the previous Y4Y contract, we knew a lot about what the field already needed. We had been collecting information and data on that side as well, but we also knew that everything changed following the pandemic. So there was a huge focus on understanding what the needs were from the recovery, because we were about 3 years post-pandemic, but that's really when we started getting all the data in to truly see where the needs and where the bleeds were and how we could address those. So in January, as Deborah shared, we spoke to many of you who were there. For those of you who weren't there, we kind of gave you this same timeline about what we were going to do, kind of like what I said this morning, but now we're reflecting on what we actually did do. And so that survey, and we do hope to do this, but we introduced to you all a needs assessment survey. We plan to do that every year. Y'all saw us do it a little bit this morning to capture some of the data that we needed from you about this idea of a community of practice. But going into this next year, we want and need to understand, what's shifted? What priorities of yours have shifted? What's the, hot button topic at the department these days? Because we know that's shifting. So what are those things that we need to take into account at multiple levels, not just at one level? So kind of, again, what Deborah was saying, we're looking at things on a national level, but now we want to know what's going on with you, your states, and what's most pressing. We did that in January. We'll do it again here. I'll talk about it in just a minute. We closed that survey in February, and immediately we started analyzing that data, used the previous data that we had about needs, and we were able to start delivering some training events, mostly those universal events that I talked about this morning. And February, we also started attending some conferences. I know we saw some of you all at Beyond School Hours, which was a great touch point for us to get back into the field, but really to start hearing from your subgrantees. So we engaged with them at the booth, we engaged with them at some sessions, they gave us some feedback. So now we had state level, we had national level data, we had state level data, we had local level data that we were able to analyze. We put out an interim report in March, April, and again, just kind of hit the ground running with that new fresh data that we had and started delivering or continue to deliver more of those universal types of events. But then what we were able to do, and we'll talk about it here in just a little bit, is our individualized technical assistance process, or our ITAPs, our plans. We were able to start piloting these. And thank you to North Carolina and thank you to Michigan for helping us to pilot this process, because we had an idea of what we wanted it to look like, but we had to test out our ideas, and working with both of those states really led us to make some changes to that ITAP process. But I think you're going to hear, especially tomorrow, you're going to hear, if you get to go to the panel, you'll hear directly from your peers on how this process has worked for them. So we started the process, we piloted that process, we learned a lot from that, and we're going to be continuing to make some improvements as we'll talk to you in a little bit this afternoon. From May to August, and I can't even believe we're already thinking about being in August, which I think is tomorrow or in 2 days. But we continue doing our training events, but what we've really been able to do is dig into some of that targeted TA services that we're able to provide to our ITAP pilot states. So we're really excited about that. Also using the Summer Symposium, this is a great kickoff year it's a great time of year for us to be able to kick off new information that we need for the new school year, right? But it's also a time of reflection for us. So we're taking everything that we've done so far, we're analyzing it, we're learning about where the pain points were, how we can make changes, and we're going to deliver that into year 2 of the NTAC grant. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, but I'm going to turn it back over to Deborah and take you to your groups.
Okay, so as promised, we'd like you to do a little bit of work and a little bit of chatting here. So you see the prompt on the screen, but we'd like you to just take a few minutes and chat at your table. If you are at a lone table, meaning you're all with folks from your own state, I'd encourage you to turn your seat around or, get up and take a momentary walk to that next table just so you can chat with some other folks. And what we want you to talk about is this idea of at your state. How are you connecting this idea of PD to program quality to help you build capacity, right? Where you're using data, you're thinking through making those choices about where do we need to improve. And moving the needle on performance indicators is ultimately what we're always trying to do, right? It's what we're trying to get to. What results are you seeing or not seeing? What's going or not going? So take a few minutes. We're going to circulate, and I guarantee you that somebody, possibly wearing a blue dress, will say something like, hey, I really liked that. I'm going to call on you in a minute to share that. So go be brilliant so we can hear all of your brilliance, and then we'll come back together, chat a little bit as a big group, and then move into a few more examples before we conclude our presentation. Thanks. All right, you want to start? Yeah. So if you find anyone. Okay. Got it. so I'm like holding on with both hands. Okay, hi everyone. I'm sorry to interrupt because I hear so many good conversations. But we do want a chance to do a brief share out and then also get to just a few more items we want to share with you. So both Candace and I heard some really great things while we were wandering around among you. And I did let her know ahead of time, and she's threatened to never let me sit at her table again. But I'd like to ask Amanda from Montana to find a microphone and just share with us this great practice they have with action plans. Awesome. Thank you.
Hi. Yes, I did threaten her. I told her she could never sit at our table again. In Montana, we have a couple different processes that help us get our programs to focus in on what they may need to do to improve their programs. And first, we have regional representatives because we're such a large state. We have 3 regional representatives around our state, and we have a state evaluator. And at the end of the summer every year, we all get together and we pull together all the each individual grantee's information, and we aggregate that information and we use it in order to determine what kind of professional development we're going to do throughout the year based on that data that we get. And the way that they give that data to us is at the end of every year, as they are submitting their continuing application within their 5-year cycle, they have to include an action plan. And that action plan is 2 to 3 items that, from looking at their data throughout the year, that they use in order to improve their program in the following year. So we're now moving to that local evaluator, but we've had our state evaluator. We always have a self-assessment process at the end of the year. So after that self-assessment process, they can look at that and determine what are the top things that they want to put in that action plan that they want to try to improve for their program the following year. Then once those are all submitted, we look through those and figure out what are the top pieces where they're saying that they need professional development or technical assistance, and then that's how we base what we're going to do the following year for that.
Thank you. That was just such a great example of putting a process in place that really helps your subgrantees in their own processes. I did ask her, and she does template that report, which makes me very happy. But so that process unto itself already a great process, but it's that kick it up a notch, next level, pull those together, aggregate the information in a regular cadence. We talk about that all the time, right? It's on the calendar every year at the end of August. She pulls together all her folks, they look through the aggregated information, and they set a PD calendar. So all those items that we've talked about in using data and making it explicit, planning time to do the planning, that is all evident in there within a practice that supports subgrantees in their own individual work. So it's sort of win, win, win on 3 levels. It's really exciting. So I will briefly ask, a little bird in a pink and white shirt told me that there were some very awesome conversations over in this area at that table and that table, and that maybe somebody from one of those tables would volunteer and come tell us about some of the cool things they were talking about. I know you want to. She is? I see her moving. I see it. I see it. She's quick. Yes. Come on, Princella. The microphone's right there. Dr. Scroggins is delivering it personally. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to start this again by saying I'm the newbie. So
That's fair.
all right. So we're talking about performance indicators, and so at New York State we have local evaluators who do performance indicators for each of the sub-grantees. So we're trying to decide, first of all, they're not all going to be the same, and then how do you tell a PD is addressing those performance indicators? There's no way to measure that. So that was our conversation.
So I think what they're talking about, and I think this is a really good question, is you can put in these great local practices, and that next level conversation that you're beginning to have is, how do we then inform that for New York State, right? So the local group gets its goodness and it's working on its indicators, but there's that ability to say, let's kick that up a notch, and what does that mean? So that's a great practice for you to zero in on. It's a great practice to say, there's something more here. How do we connect it? So I love that. I have a couple of ideas, if you would. Okay, so thank you all. That was fantastic. I'm going to pass this back to Candace, and we're going to get into a few more details about NTAC.
Thank you. And I love that. Just practicing the inquiry is, of the whole professional inquiry model. Like, you may not yet be there, but you're starting to formulate ways in which you can take it to the next level. So that's great. So what I want to do now in the time that I have left with you all is just really kind of give you an overview of the ITAP process. The ITAP is essentially the NTAC's data-driven process, as I mentioned, that really is for you. It's for the state coordinators, and it is us taking the opportunity to not only do a little bit of research on our end to determine what your needs are, but to also have these conversations with you about what you need, and then figure out a way how we can deliver it to you in the way that you need. So this is a process that we're going to be doing annually, so putting it on the calendar 2 times a year. There's not a heavy lift on your part because we know that you are very, very busy. So I'm going to just talk in a little bit about what that process is going to look like. But I do want to make the connection before we dive into that, because when we were thinking of developing this ITAP process, we had to have some sort of indicators or some sort of North Star on our own to determine, what do we really want this process to look like? What do we want to gain out of the ITAPs? We knew, in the Federal Register, the department had already put together their ideas of the priority areas that were important to the department for us to focus on. So we took all of that and took our ITAP and we aligned it with the priority areas of the NTAC. So the main one is to build capacity of 21st CCLC programs. That is, that's critical, and that can mean so many things. But then there are also other ways. We know that we need to help address the impacts of COVID. We already talked about that. But then there's this whole concept of equity and access to resources. We were talking over here at this table about, and I know several of you have this same issue, where you have grantees, the same grantees coming back and applying for grants, and they usually are awarded. And then you have new grantees that you want to bring in, but it's difficult for them to compete with others. So it's trying to think clearly, how can we make that connection and make the access equitable? Of course, we know we need to help support students' social, emotional learning and academic needs, especially following the pandemic. And there are very distinct academic focus areas that we know that you all need help with in either getting started or improving on the services that you're already providing. But these last two, and especially as we were thinking about the ITAPs, these last two I think is what really speaks to you as state coordinators, not only as running and implementing these large federal grants at the state level, but then ensuring that your local subgrantees are not only fiscally compliant, they're in compliance with the statute, but they're also producing high quality programs, because at the end of the day, that's what moves the needles with kids and with families. So we wanted to make sure that we were addressing all of those areas in the ITAP process itself. So the ITAP is essentially a 5-step process. The first 3 is all on us, and it's our senior TA liaisons, which I'll hand out some information here in a minute to show you who your TA liaison is. But it is all on our team to start doing some research first, to gathering information, to looking at data, and looking at a variety of data points that are already out there in the public domain. So we get online and we look at your state's, your most recent state's RFA or RFP. We look at your evaluation reports that you've posted online. We have conversations with the department program officers to just truly get an understanding of what your needs are in your state. And then from there, we come up with a summary of what we've seen. And this is just our first pass at saying, okay, here's what we've seen out there, typically before we even have any conversations with you, so that we can come to the table and say, hey, we've been doing some research and we've seen this may be an area of need that you have. Can we talk? Can we set up a time to, to dig into that a little bit deeper? So that's where step 4 comes in, and that's truly our opportunity for our senior TA liaisons to engage with you, to really, dig into that data. And we may read something that says, oh yeah, through a monitoring report, this was a finding or this was an area to improve. But when we talk to you, you say, no, we cleared that, we're good, we don't really think we need help in that area, but what we really could do is use some help over in this area. So it's through these conversations with you and your state level staff that's going to help us truly understand how we can then come in and provide the fun stuff, right? Like I say the fun stuff, but step 5 is really figuring out how we're gonna deliver training to you. Whether it's gonna be a universal event that happens one time. Those are great. We want to continue to do those. But what we really want to do through this process is dig in a little bit deeper and go more. Go figure out where your true pain points are, and then sit next to you, plan what that is going to look like, what that TA is going to look like, what that professional development is going to look like. But we can only do that if we sit next to you and we understand what your true needs are. Now, I will say this too, the ITAP process is not required of states. We are going to do our work on our end to make sure we at least have a profile, if you will, of what your state may need. But we have a process in place where you can contact us and your senior TA liaisons, and you can reach out and schedule a time to talk to them more and figure out if this is a good time for us to, to start coming into the state and giving you all some services. So in a nutshell, that is the ITAP process. We're going to do it every year, like I mentioned. Probably around this time is a good time. In alignment with the summer symposium, so that we have you here, and if we have any information we want to deliver to you or get back from you, this is a good time to do it. But going back to that continuous improvement piece, we are going to check back in 6 months or so and say what's changed, or having conversations with you. Do you have a different need or a different area of need, or what if something that we talked about 6 months ago is no longer a need or has kind of dissipated? So the idea is that this is a relationship building process. We don't want you to feel forced like you have to come to us and do a lot of thinking around what it is that you want for your year, for your plan, for your PD plans, for your states and your subgrantees. We want to make it this process that is engaging, and it's collaborative, and it's cooperative, and that you all will see us as your thought partners in this. So we talked a little bit this morning about the universal events, and again, that's a great entry into the services and the resources that we can provide to you. But if you look at this more targeted and intensive services of the multi-tiered system of support, this is really where we want to engage with you in the ITAP process. So if you look at some of the different types of events here that we could, or resources that we could provide you, again, this is all going to be based on your needs and or your state subgrantee needs. So we may, have conversations, and you guys may say, hey, at the state level, we're good, we're high quality, we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing, but my subgrantees need some help in this area. So whatever it is that we can do to support you, we will come in and we will make that happen for you. And so it's based on your needs. And then again, it's also for you and your state staff or your subgrantee staff. It could be for your project directors, your site coordinators, and even your frontline staff. So we can really get in there and train multi-levels of staff who are running these programs. And then the types of services you see here could be virtual series that we could create for you. It could be on-site workshops, we could do virtual workshops, and we can even customize tools and resources for you. We can bring you the tools and resources that we have, but if there's something more specific that you want to really drill into at your state, we can sit next to you and kind of help you develop that product. And then, of course, we do through both targeted and intensive services, we want to create this community. We called it this morning a community of practice. You heard knowledge networks. The idea is really to create a space within our website where you as state coordinators or your state staff and then or your subgrantees can come in and have that community to go deeper on a topic or just to say, hey, I'm struggling with this. Do you know, anybody have any ideas of how I can improve this practice? So making a community for you all to come and do that continuous engagement with. And then lastly, we can do, coaching, especially on these more, like if you're really just having a specific need or a pain point somewhere, we have experienced in out-of-school time and 21st CCLC programs, our senior TA liaisons and our sub-grantee liaisons can really come in there and provide that more intensive one-on-one coaching with you and your staff. So that's just a little bit about the overview of the multi-tiered systems of support. I want to talk really briefly about the work that we've been doing so far with North Carolina and then with Michigan. I'm not going to give away too much because we do have a presentation tomorrow at 10 o'clock where they are going to be serving on a panel talking about their experience through this process. But I'll tell you, we were on a call last week with Dr. Hamilton and he shared some of his outcomes from one of his most recent needs that we were assisting on. And I got chills because it was that moment of like, man, this is great. It worked exactly what they wanted and needed our help with. They are getting and they're building a relationship with us to go into not only this fall, but long lasting. And a couple of things that Dr. Hamilton said are key. I'll tell you in a minute. But you can see here just a couple, under the topic column, a couple of the areas that they identified that they had particular needs with. One was the RFA, or the RFP. And that's something that I'm hearing consistently here today is folks wanting to improve upon their RFPs. Others were improving academics through enrichment, project management, and then they reached out and said that they would like some support from the INTAC for their conference that I think is next week. So I know you're here and then you're going to be there. So one of the biggest things that we did with them, though, in response to the assistance for the RFP was created a 3-part webinar series because they had some very specific areas that they were wanting to see improvement on in their RFPs. Of course, the overall needs assessment was one of them. The other was this idea of family engagement, not just one-time family activities, but really pushing deeper into the concept of family engagement. But they also wanted to focus on new grantees from areas of the state that had not yet, that had not traditionally been represented. So they had some very specific things that they were looking to do. We were able to create a 3-part series for their prospective grantees or sub-grantees. They have since awarded their RFP, and I think you guys are getting ready to start soon, right? Next week. So they're onboarding next week. And then the really cool thing was because they were thinking about this, what did I say, it was March and April, we kind of started having these conversations. But they were thinking like, not only do we want and need support for the RFP, but then we want you to come back and train our new cohort on project management, on implementation fidelity, on data collection and all those requirements that we've heard about that are, they can be very cumbersome, especially to new grantees. So just making that alignment and that connection with them. So next week, our INTAC team will be in North Carolina at their state conference. And like I said, I'm not going to give away too much, but come to the session tomorrow and you'll hear Dr. Hamilton share some of his outcomes so far. And like I said, they were really exciting. So. Moving to Michigan, always a friend in Michigan, Lorraine. One thing I love about Lorraine is that she is always willing and open to new ideas. She has been doing this for over 20 years, but she is not afraid to move the needle in a number of different directions, and she's not afraid to ask for outside support, outside assistance. And so working with Lorraine and her team at the state, they knew, and just like all of you, I'm sure are struggling in the area of staffing, retaining staff, recruiting staff, and they also know that they had very specific needs here, but what they wanted to focus on was self-care for their existing staff. And I think that's definitely something that we often kind of put aside because we're so worried about getting staff in the door, we don't get a chance to really focus on how do we keep them. So we've worked with them. We've gone out to do a series of trainings for self-care with their staff, and we're going to continue that on into the school year. And another area they felt like they needed, and they already knew, they had their data, they knew exactly what they needed, more help with this idea of intentionality in activity design. So this was a case where they said, we know exactly what we need. We want you to come in and do it for us. We need a thought partner to help us figure out, because we've been training on it, but we need a thought partner to help us figure out how do we take this to the next level. So we've been able to go in there and do some additional support with them that we are, again, continuing on into the fall. And then one other great thing, too, is they know they wanted to focus on project-based learning. But as we were talking to them and really kind of digging in on these two other topic areas, we felt like, you know what, let's put a pause on that for right now, because PBL in and of itself, it's a big endeavor to undertake. So if we step back and we think about this intentional alignment piece, that's a lot too. So let's focus on that one area. And hey, we're here for 4 more years. So we've got plenty of time to dig in there, to be thought partners with you, but also to kind of plan it out too over the next several years. And again, really just meet you where you are. So thank you, Michigan. Thank you, North Carolina. Thank you for helping us make the process better and improve it, and we'll continue to do that throughout. So I wanted to show you real quickly, too, for your senior TA liaisons. Again, these are going to be your main contacts if you need any kind of help or support from the NTAC. They are basically assigned to you. They're assigned to you per your program officer. So I added their pictures here, but they are going to be scoping you out over the next couple of days. If they find you, please be nice and say hello. I've already seen you. Your face is familiar. They'll be doing some sessions, but they'll also be hanging out next door in booth number 301. They have some really cool swag to hand out. They will be your main points of contact. They're already started, like I said, doing that data collection piece and working on your ITAPs, and many of them are just ready to start taking it to the next level with you. I know in the last several weeks we've had probably 7 or 8 states reach out for additional support, so we're starting to build and work on those relationships. But I just wanted to make sure you all had this information. You knew who your TA liaison was. Hillary Jones is at the top, Shanika in the middle, John, who's a former state coordinator, by the way, from Delaware, I believe, and Miguel. So these are going to be your points of contact, and any support and assistance you need, you can reach out to them. We also have assignments for the sub-grantee TA liaisons, and I wanted you all to see this as well, just so you know that we have a whole staff at the NTAC that's available to support your sub-grantees. Now, these assignments are the same as with the monitoring and the TA team, so that we have that consistency in messaging and communications. And you can see here, your sub-grantees who've been attending some of our sessions too have probably already seen them, they're familiar with them, but wanted you to have this information as well, as they are the people assigned to your state, your region, that can come out and provide any kind of training and technical assistance that you need, free of charge, I should say that, because this is no cost to you. And your budgets. This is all on us, and we are funded to come and help support you in these ways. And I believe Sean was passing out some bookmarks, so at your tables you should have a bookmark that has your senior TA liaison assignments. It also has a Calendly link where you can reach out to them and you can schedule an appointment at any time that works for you. All right, turning it back to Deborah.
So, we're going to skip our interactive poll, and I will save it for another time when we're together, just because we're running a little behind. How do I keep going? There we go. Okay, so just real quickly, coming back to what's our key takeaway? What do we want to be thinking about? We want to have in our heads this idea of professional inquiry and professional development deriving what we're trying to do. In order to do that, data must be connected to decision making. That's an easy thing to sort of remember and think, okay, how do I make that real? What steps do I need to take to make that happen in my state? Maybe I'm already doing it. Maybe I can push it up a little bit here, or maybe it's something, I have a particular problem. I love that New York shared one with us. Here's one where I can think through this. I can connect it to what's next. So there's a lot of support and help. We just heard about so many great things coming out of NTAC, connecting that national to the state to the local. And we also have, coming up from the monitoring team, the addition of some summer symposium work in the next couple of days, but the ongoing RFA cohort work will continue as we've all started together, and we'll be digging in a lot around these continuous improvement questions. Continuing then into the fall regional meetings, that's been out on the listserv. I encourage you to get signed up for that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just reach out to any one of us and we'll make sure to connect you with the information. We're very excited about that small group digging in, talking through, and having the opportunity to share together. And then, of course, the ongoing individualized support that you might need to solve a particular problem, that TA model. Maybe you have a monitoring finding that you're working through. It happens. And that's what we're here for. Your POs can help you connect with the right tool, whether it's just reaching out to them and saying, hey, what might be the best way for me to think through this? Or, hey, I do have these findings and I want to talk through that. Any of those things, start with your PO and they can help you think through that. All of these tools, all of them are data-driven unto themselves. We're using data to design them, data from all of you. That's what we started with today. And will help you use data more effectively to connect back. And that's how all the strings get pulled together. So thank you all so much for spending so much time with us. And I will see you again shortly for a little 21 APR fun. Thank you to my colleague Candace, and we enjoy seeing you the next few days.